Now, I'm delighted to be joined by Lord Frost, former Brexit Minister, Boris Johnson's Brexit negotiator. Great morning to have you on, David. We hear from Dominic Raab this morning that the government is on the cusp of a deal. Do you know what's in it?
I've absolutely no idea what's in it. We've all read what's been in the media over the last week or so I guess we have some sense of it, but nobody can come up with a proper judgment till we've seen some actual texts of some kind or other.
But is it wrong that the likes of Brexiteers like you have got all of the experience that you have with the EU and negotiating with them, have been frozen out of this process? You're not the first person to say that. The DUP has got concerns. They don't know what's in the deal. What's Rishi Sunak playing at? Why is he blocking you out of this?
So I don't expect to be involved myself. I'm not part of it. They've got a good team. I think what's made people nervous probably is that we've not been quite sure what the government has been trying to achieve. And when I was doing the negotiations back in 19 and 20, we set out very clearly what we were aiming to do and why. And I think there's been some nervousness that maybe the government isn't seeking to achieve everything that's really important to people who care about stability in Northern Ireland and the sovereignty of the country. But sounds like we're about to find out in the next day or two, so let's see.
Well, what does a good deal look like to you?
Well, I think that the way the politics in Northern Ireland has been over the last 2 or 3 years means that the protocol can't survive in its current form. It was workable at the start, but I think the world has changed and it can't survive. The only question is, do we get there in one go with the protocol bill, or do we get there in stages by an agreed route? But I think there can no longer be any doubt about the correct destination for this, which is full sovereignty over the whole country. Now, for me, a good deal, if it's a negotiated deal, is one which takes a significant step in that direction and doesn't present itself as the final step, that it can continue to evolve and get us to that endpoint.
Is the main red line for you, as it is for the DUP, this idea of continued ECJ jurisdiction over decision making in Northern Ireland?
So the question is not so much the court as EU law. If you have EU law, you always have to have the court, and the core problem is the imposition of EU law in Northern Ireland without consent. Now, if the government's been able to do something significant about that, then that's a big thing. I don't know whether they have. I don't know how hard they've been trying. We will see.
Well, how much confidence have you got in Rishi Sunak, the Brexiteer, negotiating this? Because I don't know, but I'm getting the idea that there are probably more concessions being made than Brexiteers might like.
I mean, we would like an endpoint like the one that I described. I think it's realistic that's not going to emerge out of this deal or this negotiation.
Do you trust him on this, is my point? Because I remember writing stories about you being Brexit negotiator and feeling that he blocked some of your manoeuvres from his position at the Treasury as Chancellor. This idea that he is in hock with people at the Treasury who are desperate to maintain these trade links at all costs. You know, I felt that there was friction between you and Sunak when you were in your post.
So I think possibly, I can't speak for the Prime Minister personally, obviously. I think they're possibly over-worried about the risk of retaliation of some kind from the EU if we don't reach a deal. So I think that's one of the difficulties. But
that compromises Rishi Sunak's position then. He's not going in hard enough.
Well, I think what has worried me slightly is that we seem to have parked the bill. The Northern Ireland Protocol bill would have overridden the protocol. And I think if we were really tough, we would be pushing that through the Lords at the same time in parallel to make it clear that if there wasn't a good deal, there was another option. So I worry slightly that's been parked and maybe that's weakened our hand slightly. But
so you're on Boris Johnson's side of that argument when it comes to no, stick with the bill, don't just have a deal, although he has said there'll be a vote on a deal. Just talking about you and Boris Johnson, obviously the Remainers and your chief critics will say, well, this is all your fault. You know, you negotiated this protocol that has not been good for Northern Ireland, it's not been good for the UK, and now we're having to extricate ourselves from it.
You have to take one step back. Theresa May and her team negotiated this terrible deal in 2018. It wouldn't go through Parliament. It would have kept the whole country in the customs union and bits of the single market forever with an EU lock. What we did was improve that. We put in place a deal that meant we could negotiate a free trade agreement. We gave the Northern Ireland Assembly Stormont consent over the continuation of the protocol, and we changed a few other things. So it was an improvement. We wouldn't have started from the point we had to start,
So
ideally.
it was Theresa May's fault, really?
It ultimately goes back to the mistakes that were made in 17 and 18. We corrected some of them. I wish we'd been able to do more, but with Parliament and the constitutional meltdown as it was, we took a view that the most important thing was to deliver on the referendum results. And I think if we hadn't done that, who knows what would have happened in British politics. So it was an unsatisfactory choice, but I believe we took the right choice to get us out of the EU and get on with the future.
But right choices are important now, aren't they? You know, you've had this period of instability in the Tory party. A number of prime ministers have had to resign over Brexit, effectively, since the days of Cameron. I mean, are you in danger of throwing the baby out with the bathwater here? You're going to have to make concessions, because what's the alternative? The next government is a Labour government, perhaps, that's what the polls suggest, and then you've got Keir Starmer, an arch Remainer, negotiating with the EU. You're going to lose even more. So it's interesting, isn't it, to see what's your reaction to David Davis in the papers today saying, oh, you know, actually, I think Brexiteers could be happy with this.
So we'll have to see what's in it to know whether we're happy about it or not. I still don't give up on winning the next election. So let's see about that. I've no doubt that if Labour win, they'll want to dismantle bits of the deal, come what may. So I wouldn't
can Starmer
be too
be trusted on
spooked by
Brexit?
that.
He's apparently a Brexiteer now. Do you believe that?
I think he'll have to have had a pretty Damascene conversion from what we saw over the last few years. But I'm very glad if it's true, because the country's future is outside the EU, and the more politicians who are committed to that, the better. Actually, I'm a bit doubtful. I think they will take policy decisions that will get us closer to the EU, to alignment, to economic control by the EU over time, and I don't think that's in our interest.
So you think Labour will creep back into...
I don't think they'll take us back necessarily into membership straight away, but I think every time there's a policy choice for them, they'll take the solution that takes us closer to the EU rather than away from it, and that's how we'll get closer.
With the party, I think the latest Savanta poll put you at 14 points behind Labour. How on earth are you confident that you're going to win the next general election? Not least when you often write in my newspaper, The Telegraph, criticising all of the decisions the government's making.
Well, I think one thing they could do is not take some of the decisions that they have taken and take some other ones. Well, we've got to have an economic policy that is recognisably conservative, is not only driven by the need for sound money and reducing deficits, but also looks at growth and looks at stimulating growth and activity in the economy.
So do you think the Chancellor's taking an unconservative approach to economics?
I think it's not the full range of conservatism. Of course, sound money is important. Of course, we don't want to be running deficits. But of course, we also want an economy that's growing, that can fund some of the things that we want to see funded.
So corporation tax, should it go up? Or should he scrap that?
I think it definitely should be scrapped. I saw the letter this morning, and even though Philip Hammond and
Lord
George
Hammond
Osborne signed it, I still think it's a good
Your
idea.
former nemesis.
I do think the signal we're giving with this corporation tax increase is a poor one, and it should be changed. And if we have to find spending cuts, great. But I think there's a bigger thing going on. It's the mentality we're into at the moment, where I was watching TV this morning before I came on, and I saw one group advocating free hearing tests for the 40s and 50s, and another group advocating free bereavement counselling in schools. Nobody's kind of against those things, but when we are spending and taxing and accumulating debt so much, we've got to stop all trying to give each other free stuff. We've got to change that mentality.
States become too big under the Conservative Party, you're saying,
absolutely.
Lord Frost. You've been in power for 12 years. This has happened under your watch.
Yes, it has, and that is the problem. We've seen this creep up over the last few years, and we need to change it. And
quick word on your own ambitions. Are you going to try and fight a seat and become an MP? I know you're in the House of Lords now, but there's been talk of that.
So I'm talking to the party about this. If a constituency wanted me to and the party wanted me to, then obviously I would take that very seriously.
So you're not ruling it out?
I'm not ruling it out.